Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Data Visualization Society Fireside Chat on Data Viz in Government. We'll give folks a few minutes to join the live stream, and then we will jump on in. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Joshua Pine, and I am a volunteer with the Data Visualization Society. Thank you all for joining us today. If you're unaware, the Data Visualization Society is a membership-based organization that brings together data visualization professionals and practitioners from countries around the globe, as well as various industries. We're excited during this fireside chat to dive into one particular industry and hear from a great expert panelists on how they've practiced data visualization within the public sector in particular. The Data Visualization Society hosts a variety of fireside chats, of which this is one. You can check out our YouTube channel for previous fireside chats and also stay tuned for more upcoming content. So for today, we're particularly excited, as I mentioned, to dive into the particular topic of data visualization within the government sector. We're excited to have our three panelists joining us here today, and I'll go ahead and read their bios as they join us up here on stage. Wonderful. Welcome all. First of all, we're joined by Ava Pereira, who's the Chief Data Officer for the City of Los Angeles. Her team leads the delivery of a wide range of data products across topics like racial equity, the pandemic recovery, and more. And in addition to this, she manages the Open Data Portal, as well as the community and academic engagement programs that the city leverages for their open data. Welcome, Ava. We're also joined by Chris Andrzejczuk, who's the manager of data science and research with the city of Edmonton. A social worker by training, Chris works alongside an inspiring and scrappy team obsessed with solving real-world problems and moving insight into action. From data governance to public safety, social services to information security, Chris has led a range of portfolios focused on improving the lives of Edmontonians. Welcome, Chris. And last but certainly not least, we're joined by Eileen Proffer, who is an open data enthusiast who believes that transparency builds trust. As a civic analytics specialist with the city of Sioux Falls, Eileen works closely with public safety, community health, and housing to create and promote data visualizations that enable data-informed decisions. Eileen dreams of a world where spatial intelligence is recognized as an indispensable asset to any organization, where every book comes with a map and where groceries magically appear in her fridge. Welcome all. Thank you for being here and being willing to share your insights with us. To get started, would love to go around, maybe introduce yourself briefly, and then hear a little bit more about how data visualization impacts your work in government. Maybe we'll start with Eileen.
Sure. So I'm Eileen Proffer in the city of Sioux Falls. We are a city of about 200,000 people and the largest city in South Dakota. And we use data visualization, particularly in our department, to support all of our department's sort of strategic goals and try to help communicate not only with the public what they're trying to do, but with other stakeholders and like for funding for grants and for the budget going through council. So it comes up in a lot of places.
Wonderful. Thank you. Chris, do you want to go next?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Chris Andrzejczuk, Manager of Data Science and Research for the City of Edmonton. And if you've yet to visit Edmonton, we're the northernmost city with a population over 1 million. We also have the largest urban river valley in North America. So just for context, it's about the size of all of Manhattan. And we have the largest cowboy boot in the world. So there's something for everybody here in our city. I'm really excited to be here, thrilled to have met Joshua and to have been invited to spend the morning together. I'm just looking forward to our time together.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chris. And Ava, you want to round us out?
Sure. Thanks for having me here this morning, Josh. And Nice to be here with you all this morning. I'm Ava from the City of Los Angeles, and we use data to communicate results with the public, communicate impact with the public, and also as an internal decision-making tool. So excited to dive into that a little bit more on the call today.
Wonderful. Thank you. I also realized I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Joshua Pine. I work as the Program Manager for City Innovation and Data at the National League of Cities. So very excited to be joining this wonderful group of panelists and diving into these topic areas. For attendees who are joining us, feel free to throw questions into the comment section. We'll get to those a little bit later during our time together. To get started, I think all of us, especially over the past couple years of the pandemic, have noticed a proliferation of data visualizations focused on public health, case numbers, and certainly seeing government entities joining in the creation of a lot more data visualizations. Would love to hear from you all, specifically with work that you've been involved with, whether or not kind of over the past several years in particular, you've seen a shift in how data visualization has been practiced within the government sector. For anyone who wants to chime in, feel free to jump in, and then we can go around after that.
Yeah, I mean, I can take that one. I feel like I've seen a growing use of data visualization in the public sector. In our organization in particular, we have a lot of departments that use software called ArcGIS Online. So it's a geospatial data visualization and analysis tool. And we have a lot of departments that are actively using ArcGIS Online to do gap analysis, to identify, pockets of the city that they should be prioritizing in the rollout of a particular program or service. So, I think this is one data visualization tool that I've just seen being adopted a lot more over the past 3 years. I don't know if the other folks on the line also use that tool, but.
Yeah, we do use ArcGIS, and data visualization is really central to what we do. So my team, we have data scientists, architects, strategic foresight analyst, data storyteller, and we have a very simple purpose. We exist to solve real-world problems at the City of Edmonton. So we work with teams across our organization. It starts with defining that problem appropriately. Then you collect the relevant data, organize it in a way that our data scientists do their magic with it. And then when you get the insight, that's where data visualization comes to life. And that's really where it has its most impact. I think of it like, it's like the box that comes with your iPhone. Like, you don't buy the box, you're buying the phone, but the way that the box wraps it, the way that it communicates the impact, the way that it can resonate emotionally with you, that's really the value of visualization.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And the story aspect of our data, I think the way that we've seen it grow, we also use ArcGIS. That's where we started as a department under engineering. They needed to know where their utilities were. And we've just grown since then and moved into just expanding the amount of products, I guess, that we make. So we have open data, we have dashboards that people are asking for monitoring and evaluating. We have interactive applications on the web. We've been asked more recently. I think the PowerPoint slide is well, can we have more visual with that rather than just text? That comes up kind of a lot. And then also just in your annual reports to the community and community health needs assessments and things like that. So definitely there's a strain being felt right now of all the data products being asked for.
Yeah, that's both exciting and imagining a challenge as well. And particularly appreciate your analogy, Chris, of the iPhone box, and the way that we package insights is certainly an important process. Ava, I think you alluded to this in your kind of initial introduction, but I know one of the both opportunities and challenges present of conducting data visualization within government work is the multitude of audiences that our work touches on. There's certainly the general public that the governments want to educate. There's elected officials within government that we report to, and then there's also other staff within various departments. Would love to hear from you all. How do you kind of balance between those multitude of audiences, and in particular, how do you take some of these complex data insights, begin to communicate those to a wide range of audiences? Anyone can chime into that one.
We're all playing chicken. I'll jump in. So I think I think you're right. You have a multitude of audiences. You have to meet people where they're at. I think it's meeting folks where they're at, and also right sizing the visualization. Like complicated is not always better. Aileen's points really well stated. Sometimes like it's a presentation or a PDF that absolutely fits. And I think it's about, recognizing that good visualization is not the ends, it's just the means. You can have the perfect visualization, and if it doesn't change what people do, if it doesn't change policy or process, it's probably not as effective as something that's simple, something that's digestible, non-intimidating for your audience, and that's going to result in actual change on the ground.
Yeah, I would piggyback off that and just say that, like, the data visualization part matters in the context of, like, if you want something actionable, we need to include the context of our data. So we have an open data site, we have 200 data sets out there, but if we don't tell people why they might be interested in looking at it, then it actually doesn't get a whole lot of hits. So we usually do want a story to go along with it, or a graph that just shows a trend over time and then allows you to download the data and play with it yourself. And that kind of like interactivity takes a little bit more thought, and so that you give the basic message for someone who's just there for a little bite, but also allows someone to dig deeper if they're more interested.
Yeah, I would say, just to sort of piggyback off what the other two have said, knowing your audience is very important. And I think simplicity also is key. One of the things that we thought greatly about when we were developing a community data site called knowyourcommunity.lacity.org is that we just wanted to keep the visualizations as simple and intuitive as possible. The less clicking around, the better. I don't want people to have to, go through this complicated path in order to access the insights that we want them to access. So while we were designing the site, we thought, let's just make it as straightforward, make all the options available on the homepage so that they can dive into the particular policy areas that they're interested in, and then have the focal point be the data visualization. So simplicity, the less clicking around, the better. Just make it really as intuitive as possible.
Wonderful. Thank you all. I know one theme that's kind of emerged from various answers is the importance of stories, and making sure that kind of both the packaging of the data isn't just standalone numbers, or there's a story being woven in there. Would love to hear from you all if there's a small or a short story that you'd be willing to share about some of the work that you've engaged in, and kind of talk through how you've seen that impact of data come to play, whether it's engaging with the general public or whether it's engaging with an elected official, and how you've seen data being able to have that impact within a story form. Would love to be able to hear from you all as storytellers. Would love to hear a bit of insight from you all.
Yeah,
please go ahead.
Sure. I think I've seen data be helpful from a policy standpoint in a couple of ways. So first and foremost, I think I've seen data visualization be helpful for improving internal operations, particularly when you're visualizing, pay and promotions and doing that sort of equity assessment across an organization. Data visualization is a very helpful tool for visualizing disparities and seeing where, across different demographic splits, you're not paying equitably or promoting equitably. So that's one very impactful way that I've seen data visualization be used. Another way is in the rollout of programs and services. So I think I may have alluded to this earlier, but just doing a basic gap analysis, who's eligible for this program versus who's applied. So we've done that in a couple of programs at the city. The emergency broadband benefit, basically using the federal government's criteria, we could see which areas of the city we have a large number of eligible people. And then we can also track how much that program is being accessed in that area to see where we need to improve communications, improve outreach, and just make people aware of the fact that this benefit is available. So those are just two examples that I've seen.
I can jump in. We're content agnostic in terms of the things that come to us. So everything, from supporting the fire department to financial services. But we have, particularly over COVID, done a lot of work in public safety and social services. And there's one approach in particular, and I'll use the example of drug poisoning, which unfortunately I imagine my colleagues are dealing with similar issues in their cities. And what we've done is we've realized the power, and I'm stating the obvious here, but the power in bringing together previously siloed data. So for drug poisoning in particular, we have a project where we brought together our fire department, nonprofit data, and transit data. This is a really complicated and gut-wrenching issue, but the way that we visualized it is in smushing that data together, that's a technical term, smushing, and aggregating it on a map to roughly a city block, 250 meters by 250 meters. You can demystify this really complex issue and show people where they best position their resources to have a really significant impact. So that's that, and my colleagues have spoke to this, simple is good, like Occam's razor. Simple is good. So take a concept that's complex, make it as simple as possible and intuitive. We do training sessions for all of the people who use our application, but the goal, of course, is that that training session be not required, that you can just see the app and intuitively understand the story there, what the data is telling you, and how to make use of it to have the most impact.
So I would say that changing government operations or like policy, we probably, like many other cities, have departments that are like very data driven. They're all on board. They have leadership that's like all in and committed. They've already even got a baseline of like their data management set up. And then we have departments that are maybe still using paper and pen. So I think part of our goal is in government operations is to move more people to being data driven while having great data management. And what's complicated about that is getting everyone like away from the fear of like, we're going to be tracking you and we want your data and we're going to use it to monitor you, and like make it so that they see that it's actually going to make their jobs easier. And I think we have a great example of that. So about 2 years ago, we took on a major project to bring on a new asset management system, enterprise level in our org. And our street departments is very data driven. Like I said, they'd already been using dashboards galore to track their stuff. And so this was just kind of a beautiful thing in a really weird way. We had a great big storm, Memorial Day, and it passed through town and took down hundreds of trees. And our street department was able to like immediately track where the calls were coming in, which crews were responding, how much it was costing. And then they coordinated with our local social services who were getting phone calls from the public for help. And at the end of the week, it was like press a button, export a report to our emergency manager, and he was able to submit to FEMA to say, hey, we qualified for some reimbursement here. And then we have other departments who are a little lagging behind, and they just weren't able to create those reports in the same way. And our executive leadership was like, just witnessed that, like, look what just happened and how easy that was, and how we're never, like, it might take us a month to get it from other departments. And so now we have this buy-in from the upper level that's really saying, everybody, this is for your own good, and we're going to support you, and we're going to help you get there, because it's really benefiting us all in the end. That's our win.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. That's very inspiring to hear about the clear value of the data visualization brings. And it was really inspiring for all of your answers, thinking around this key theme of collaboration and how within typically siloed government departments and sectors, data visualization has this potential to be this really cross-cutting glue that brings together a lot of various departments that might not otherwise work together as well. A follow-up question to that, I think, on this theme of collaboration and partnership. I know for many people who are viewing in today are either working directly for governments or doing partnerships with governments maybe from outside. Would love to hear from you all not only how data visualization has this kind of collaboration glue within city government, but what are ways that you collaborate with entities outside of the government, whether that's academia, other private sector organizations, even other fellow government entities? What does collaboration look like within that type of an environment?
Oh gosh, I could start on that one. So we're the biggest city in Sioux Falls. I guess normally property management happens at the county level. But what we've done with Minnehaha County, which is our biggest county, we actually split two, but Minnehaha County, we have a shared server. We're editing the same street layer when we edit streets. They're just managing, like, they know where city limits is, and they manage outside city limits, and we just manage ours, and everybody's editor tracking. So we're all in on that end with the county. They let us into their parcel managing software, and we just have joins that like fill in fields every night for publishing. With our social services, our helpline, I guess, they have ArcGIS accounts through us, actually, so that they can log in and have access to internal dashboards. With our educational system, I think we're working on it. They're definitely, in terms of a data science, where we are a bit lacking. We've tapped into our universities to say, hey, you have a data science program, and we have a specific project that we're looking for help on. So.
Yeah, and I can jump in from LA. We have a lot of local universities and have a lot of projects that we will collaborate on with teams at some of our local universities. So for example, last week, I was working on a project with we have a climate emergency mobilization office that was just established, and we now have a chief heat officer. I think a lot of cities are now appointing chief heat officers. And so we were working with a team of researchers at UCLA that have geospatially mapped excess ER visits during extreme heat events over an 8-year period to see basically which zip codes are most vulnerable in a heat wave. And it's really interesting too, because zip codes that are adjacent to one another have wildly different results. And that's a function of underlying social vulnerability. So if a particular zip code has a high degree of folks without AC units, you may see a variation across the two zip codes. So that's one, I think, example of a really fruitful partnership with the local research, some local universities. So we're pulling in their data and using that on top of some city data to strategize and prepare for future heat wave events.
I think that in Edmonton, partnerships always been popular. I think it's a necessity now, particularly coming out of COVID. The call to rethink how we do what we do has become integral. So for instance, we just don't have the capacity to keep up with demand. So we're in the process now of partnering with the University of Alberta, which is our local university, to bring on 3 postdocs to help support that work. And I think, you can see this too in social services, you can see this in public safety, but the key thing that runs consistent regardless of what the partnership is, we've learned that it's really important to not lead with partnership, but like lead with something that's mutually beneficial. To lead with, I don't mean to sound problem oriented, but to lead with that problem or lead with that opportunity and that thing that's mutually exploitive. That you're both going to come out of that and say, hey, that really achieved something for both of our organization, and it wasn't just done for the other. So we have lots of examples of that there. The University of Alberta is the most recent one, but there's really a spirit of collaboration, particularly in our nonprofits, particularly in social services, in law enforcement. All cities, no city is immune to this. We have a lot of challenges that we're dealing right now in the midst of COVID. So I think that necessity of thinking differently about how we work is really important. And, to come full circle, data visualization is such a big part of that. That archaic thinking of to work together, you have to be in the same brick and mortar structure. I just don't think that exists anymore. I think we've got to a place where we realize if you integrate your data, the people and process will follow. You don't need to, it doesn't necessitate a reorganization of your team. You can stay within your existing organization and just work and think about the work differently, thanks to the way that your data talks to one another.
And I'll just say one more thing. I think this is where open data programs can be really fruitful, because you've already developed a mechanism for sharing city data with the public. So I think that just gives you a leg up when you're starting to collaborate with outside organizations.
That's a great insight. And thank you all for sharing those beautiful examples of really fruitful collaborations and partnerships. To pivot slightly, I know one of the challenges that you all raised that in part partnership helps address is kind of capacity constraints. I know, Eileen, you mentioned early on both it's very exciting, the kind of class collaboration nature, but also how kind of capacity can't necessarily meet with demand. Thinking around kind of more broadly, what are some of the challenges that you all have faced as it relates to practicing data visualization within the government sector? Certainly, as you've alluded to, there's both kind of data visualization specific challenges, but also certainly kind of both cities and governments within the COVID era are being faced with unprecedented challenges, whether that's from climate change and chief heat officers to pandemic response. Kind of within that kind of current scope of increasing challenges in general that governments are trying to face, how have you all faced that in particular as it relates to data visualization?
I guess I can start us off or get the ball rolling. So I feel like we're nearing the end of a year too, and especially this month, we've just had a lot of requests from departments that are like, hey, I read this article. Oh, I went to this conference. I got a call from my vendor. They showed me this great digital or data visualization. And can you do that too? Or if you can't do that, will you support us if we buy a new software? And like literally every day somebody's calling with that request. And so we have to like triage it because we're just 8 people in our department. And while we do want to build new things, we still have to keep the lights on and keep running things and offering support to people we're already supporting. So we basically have we take every request in and we kind of try and categorize it in terms of advanced analytics. Like, are we trying to find a needle in a haystack? Are we developing an early warning tool? Are we trying to make better and quicker decisions? Are we experimenting with something? And if what they're requesting fits into one of those categories, and especially if it fits into their strategic goals, and their strategic goals technically should be the strategic goals of the entire org, then we're more likely to be like, okay, let's really sit down and think about this. It might not be this month, maybe it's next year, but if you want it on the roadmap, you kind of got to meet those requirements. It's got to be advanced analytics, not something that maybe we would love to support your own data analyst to create a dashboard, but we don't probably have time to make it. But if you need something bigger, it's got to meet that, like, how does this data feed your strategic goal, and how does that help move the organization into the future? So we have to triage everything, basically, at this point.
Over the past 2 years, we've had a double whammy. So we're dealing with not having the capacity to respond to demand, and that's a crunch that we're used to feeling. The thing that's changed is, particularly over COVID, the solutions that we develop for the teams that we work with went from a nice to have to something that's really required day to day. So 2 years ago, if we didn't hear back from a business area, we would assume that no news is good news. Now we can't. Now my personal metric of success is we find an issue before the business area finds an issue. So in addition to dealing with the demand of requests coming in, triaging, deploying those things, you also have to actively maintain. So we've even instituted this thing we call Fix It Friday, where we just dedicate 1 day per week just to do maintenance and support, because that's, when a city buys a bus, we know that there's oil changes, new tires, maintenance on that. You don't often think about that with technology. Like, it's just, oh, this thing will just work indefinitely. And as you know, it doesn't. Like these things that we build require love and attention ongoing. So it's that double whammy of dealing with all of the stuff that's coming in, but then also maintaining it. But since we're talking about, data storytelling, this tells a story. That unsustainable demand that's coming to our team is a story that we like to share when we talk about our queue and we talk about that relative to capacity, because that, much in the same way, the mandate of our tools, that tells a story that this is something that's a value. People see the value, and it's a very simple equation: more equals more. So if you want more of this, you have to resource it accordingly.
Yeah, and I would just add, like the others have mentioned, there's really a bandwidth issue on our end as well. I think both in terms of building out new things and supporting existing things. I've had projects that we've wrapped up a year ago, and then something breaks, or we have to give a presentation to someone who's a decision maker in their department, and all of a sudden there's that becomes a priority again. So I think when it comes to taking on new projects, we always want to sort of take a step back and see, is the juice worth the squeeze? How impactful will this project be? Is this the right project that they should be focusing on? Sometimes I think departments will think they need a dashboard when they don't really need a dashboard. So just taking a step back and figuring if this is going to be impactful, and seeing if we have the bandwidth, and then picking a data visualization tool that will require the least amount of maintenance going forward. So automating the data flows as much as possible, and working with dashboards that require very little maintenance. I think that's also a key piece of managing resources and time.
Yeah, thank you. Especially with kind of your comments, Ava and Eileen, as well, thinking around kind of a way to prioritize, thinking around kind of the goal-oriented prioritization of data visualization requests, and especially within a government sector where there is that strong public impact criteria, really impactful to think around the ways that you all are prioritizing that. One other theme that arose, and also turning to some of the questions that we've gotten in the chat, which thank you for those who have posted already, and feel free to keep those coming. We'll kind of second half of this session turn more to those. But the question around kind of data visualization platforms, certainly to your point, Chris, well acknowledged that with physical assets, we have a strong focus on maintenance, but maybe less so with technical. And Eileen, to your point as well, with the increasing number of new and flashy data visualization tools that often catch attention, kind of a two-part question. Kind of one, I know you guys already referenced ArcGIS Online as one of the tools. What are some of the other tools that are currently in your toolbox? And then what are some of the criteria that you use to evaluate different types of data visualization tools and considering whether or not you'd bring them into your toolbox? Is kind of a two-part. You're welcome to tackle one or both of those in whatever order makes the most sense.
Okay, at the city, we're definitely, since we're 8 people, most of us have a degree in geography, so we're really comfortable in ArcGIS, and that is where we started. And as those tools have kind of grown, we've grown with it. And yeah, it costs us a lot, but in terms of the, I guess the ability to hand projects off if someone's on vacation to a group that like everybody can access it and everybody knows how to use it, like really holds us back from moving on to other things. We have Tableau and we do use that. We also have Power BI. You know, they all kind of have their pros and cons, so it can be pretty difficult to choose sometimes which one to use. And I think what comes down to that decision making is how long does this have to last? You know, is this something that's potentially going to have to be around till after maybe even I leave the city? You know, like then it has to be something enterprise level and something that everyone knows how to program in. So yeah, like just some of us know a little D3, some of us know a little R, but if not everybody does, then we can't build something, you know, critical to the organization in that, because what if something needs to be changed like really quickly? Well, I can't wait for that person to come back from maternity leave, you know? So that kind of is our holdup, I think.
We've got a lot of tools, and it kind of just depends on the task at hand. I think Eva's comment's correct. Everybody wants a dashboard, but dashboard's not always required. Sometimes it's like killing a mosquito with a sledgehammer. Like it's just way too much so it can span from a PDF to a really interactive dashboard. But we have Tableau. We're very fortunate to have a GIS team, and that's in our crew. Our data scientists rather are particularly fond of RShiny. So a lot of different tools depending on the task at hand.
Yeah, I mean, I would say in LA, we use ArcGIS Online, ArcPro, the whole Esri suite of geospatial visualization tools. And, you know, when someone comes to us with a project that is very place-based or geography specific, that's the tool that we will use. And then when someone's looking more for like an operations dashboard, we'll use either Tableau or Google Data Studio. I would say when the underlying data is being maintained by the department and it lives in spreadsheets, a lot of times Data Studio is easier. The refresh is just easier. But when it comes to maps, I prefer to use Tableau. I feel that it's just a little less clunky than Google Data Studio. So those are the tools we use. And like the others have said, it really just depends on the project.
Wonderful. Thank you. Keeping an eye on the chat with some more great questions coming in. Another theme kind of on the topic of criteria to evaluate tools to use. And I know, Ava, you alluded to this, talking about kind of the power of open data sets and open data portals in particular, with this key criteria of kind of privacy, one as it relates to data tools, but also just a broader discussion of, I know it's an ongoing kind of conversation in general around how government handles data in general and data privacy, making it a little bit more tangible to the data tool conversation. Before getting too off topic, I imagine that could be a separate topic for its own fireside chat with data and privacy in government. But curious kind of your all initial thoughts on how you process through that and how you use that as a criteria to evaluate your data visualization work.
We take privacy is so important. Ethics is so important. We've during the Smart Cities Challenge, which we participated in, actually years before that, we saw this as coming like a tidal wave. You can't ignore it. You have to brace yourself for it. So we actually have a data ethicist at the city. So we have an ethicist who advises on our projects, does consultations. You know, like at university, when you hand in a paper and you get it back covered in red, we like to avoid that. So we speak with them at the beginning of the project. So we have a data ethicist. We also have our clerk's office, which advises on privacy and looks at projects from a privacy perspective and whether they require a privacy impact assessment. But we've taken a really proactive approach here in knowing that these reviews are coming, and through things like data minimalization, like the bare minimum of what's required. More data isn't always better. In fact, it's often unnecessary, and it can set up barriers for your project success. So, you know, the law enforcement projects, the social service projects I mentioned before, we only ever build them with 3 data elements. So the time of an incident, the location of the incident, and the incident type. So not only is personal information, it's just not wanted, it's not required. And that helps stay on the right side of history from an ethics and privacy perspective, but also deliver to the teams that you're working for what they so critically need.
Yeah, I would just add that, you know, with open data, we make sure that there's no PII in the data set that's published. And a lot of times the data sets that are published are aggregated up to a certain level. So there's some anonymity in that. You're just getting, you know, counts for zip code, for example, or a census tract. So I think that helps protect anonymity as well.
I'd say that also just a strong data governance policies on top of your data management and having awareness within your own org about who can see what, when. Especially we have Marcy's Law here in South Dakota that you cannot disclose the location of victims of a crime. And yet we need to know the locations of a crime to do like even internal requests about like neighborhood revitalization and stuff like that. So it's a matter of how do we handle that and know the like procedures that we're going to use with that sensitive data.
Yeah, thanks. Certainly a very important topic that is to be handled carefully, and I appreciate your all's thoughtful answers on that front. Another question in the chat kind of pivots back to one of the earlier questions that we were talking around partnerships in particular, and I think this thing will be certainly very interesting for the broader Data Visualization Society network of data visualization professionals that work in government or work in other industries but are interested in partnership with government. The question in the chat particular asks around what are opportunities for kind of a city's engagement with their civic tech community, in particular volunteer opportunities. What are ways that you all would recommend for people who are part of our Data Visualization Society network? What are the best ways to get involved with your local government, either in a volunteer capacity, helping out? What's the most helpful way to do that and not to add a burden to your all's existing plate?
I think that's a great question. I would say pick a policy or issue area that you're really passionate about and volunteer for community-based organizations that are working on that issue. A lot of times they don't have internal data people. You know, a lot of nonprofits are very strapped for cash and can't afford the data and technology people that they would like to hire. So there may be some volunteer opportunities with those community-based organizations, and the impact you can have is huge. So that's my recommendation.
I couldn't agree more with that. I think that that marriage of organizations that don't have the capacity but desperately need that support and folks that have that capacity is a beautiful one. We've seen a lot of success here with just that. I think that there's no end to interesting problems or opportunities to engage with in that sector.
I'd say that we've looked into doing kind of that hackathon idea where you've got the problem and you bring people in and let's all smush our heads together and think about this. We haven't actually run anything like that yet. And I'm not I guess I'm not sure how successful it would be until we try.
Wonderful. Well, if there's ever opportunities for you all here on the line to want to partner with people in the Data Visualization Society in particular, I'm sure we could help set something up to provide collaboration opportunities like that. I know we're coming up on the hour here, so just wanted to give you all a chance to see if you had any final words of wisdom, insight that you'd like to share. Certainly a lot of really great insights that's already come up, from keeping data visualization simple to packaging within a story context to being goal-oriented and to pursue partnerships. But just wanted to give you all a chance, any final words to close this out here today, to kind of add on to the great insights you've already shared.
I can start us off. I think if you're working with local governments or within local governments, one of the things that I've found is, it's probably going to sound cliche, but it's just to build those relationships with other departments. It's so critical that they trust you and your department and the things that come out, the products that we make. And that takes like just a bit of time and patience, because I know from our perspective, we're all, I guess we would consider ourselves pretty techy, but if you're working on paper with a paper and pen, it's a slow process. But as long as you're patient and you're willing to just go a little bit at a time, a little bit of progress at a time, and with each little thing, they just see that you're really trying to help them. You're not trying to push anything on them, but we're just trying to like make their job more efficient, especially because their supervisors are always asking for this type of information, and you're just trying to make it easier for them to succeed in their own job, really, too. And just to treat them like just with so much respect, I guess. There's a lot taken for granted. Now that I work for city government, I know a lot more about what happens to make a city run, and most people that I talk to are like, oh, I have never thought about that. If a tree falls down, I just know that the city is going to come pick it up. I have no idea how it happens. And most of our departments are not unlike us in their capacity issues. We plow thousands of miles of streets, and we have like 7 FTEs to do that. So it's really amazing what we accomplish with such limited resources. And so just when I build that relationship with them, just knowing that they are experts in their field and they're really doing their best. So how can I come alongside you and help you?
I would don't boil the ocean. Start small and start with a real problem. There's enough out there. You don't have to make something up. And preferably with somebody who agrees that it's a problem, is going to take your stuff and action it. Visualization without actions, like a book that's never read. So you really want to have that relationship, which is so key, and that trust and the willingness to know that it might not work out, but the commitment to take what's produced, take the insight that's produced, and to see it translated into something on the ground. And then lastly, just that good visualization is just the means, it's not the end. So you don't want a beautiful visualization that everyone ooh and ahs, but it doesn't change anything. You just want something that's, practical, digestible, emotionally resonant, that's going to have an impact.
Yeah, and I would just add, I guess, be tool agnostic, focus on the problem. I think a lot of times when the city in particular works with outside vendors, they're like, yes, use our tools. And sometimes you lose focus on what the problem actually is. And, they'll create something that really isn't that helpful at the end of the day. And so I think it all comes back to focusing on what is the problem I'm trying to solve. And what's, the most elegant solution for that problem, the easiest to maintain, the simplest, and the one that tells a story. Like a impactful data visualization is one that just tells a story. So that would be my advice.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Eileen, Chris, and Ava. This has been such a delight to spend the past hour with you all diving into these topics. Very grateful for you all taking the time to share this with the broader Data Visualization Society community, and we're excited to continue to support you on and the great work that you all are doing in your respective cities. So thank you.
Thank you all. Take care.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Joshua, for moderating.
Perfect. Absolutely. And just for folks who are signing off, just wanted to, on behalf of the Data Visualization Society, thank everyone for joining, and especially building on the themes of networking and collaboration and partnership. Data Visualization Society is a great organization to get plugged into if that's something that you're interested in pursuing further. Joining a global network of like-minded data visualization aficionados is a great place to get started. So if you're interested in learning more, feel free to check out our website or reach out to anyone who works with DVS. So with that, I wish you all a happy rest of your Monday and great start to your weeks. So thank you very much.